Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you all. I think I just want to acknowledge, first of all, my deepest condolences to those who are affected and who lost the fallen comrade, or not the fallen, but the murdered young woman. I think we can't say it any lighter than that, because otherwise it's a disservice and an injustice to act as though it wasn't a life ripped away from the hands and hearts of loved ones. So kind of moving into just a bit of a, because I knew that this session would get a bit heavy, I wrote down a few of my points, just because it's not necessarily a space where um, I never, in fact, I'll end up rambling for the 10 minutes rather than saying what I actually want to say, because of how emotionally charged a topic like this can get, especially for people who have experienced the violence and the injustice that comes with gender-based violence, gender injustice, as well as climate injustice. And so I'm just going to kind of regale a little bit about the work that we do, and then go into my kind of thoughts and points. So I work for an organization, two organizations, called African Climate Alliance and Project 90 by 2030. The work that we do there is social and environmental justice work, because we don't believe that one can be done without the other. Because it's quite a silly thing if you believe that there aren't intersections and interconnectedness when it comes to the way we find solutions when addressing our injustices. Someone doesn't just be a woman, they're a woman of color. They're a woman of color who are this, they're a woman of color who are this and that. And so we can't act as though that you are one person without many identity factors that play a role in the impact that you have when it comes to the injustices, which doesn't mean that you also don't have all those other ways of finding solutions for those injustices. And so just moving into kind of a little bit about what we all know already is just that we all know that disproportionately climate injustice and climate change disproportionately affects young women, women, girls, young boys. Femme bodies are always the ones who are most targeted. We've seen this in the video. We know this in general, with South Africa being the rape capital of the world. We know this just because at least someone knows someone who has been a victim of gender-based violence one way or another. And I think to not acknowledge the harms that young girls and that women face disproportionately, which is not to say that young boys and men don't face injustice as well, but just talking about it in a more kind of realistic sense, is that it's a massive issue when it comes to the harms that women and young girls face. So there's a concept, and I think I mentioned this sometime last year in a similar kind of panel, where we were speaking, and I think Bertha mentioned it earlier, which was, looking at women as victims. And I think, there's a saying, you strike a woman, you strike a rock, but that's also made us believe that it's okay to strike a woman. And so you strike a woman and she will bleed is more accurate, but it's not to say that she doesn't hold the strength and the power that comes with that first saying, yet we should not keep looking at women as they are unable to push forward in our nation, in our continent, across the world, in fact. Time and time again, we've seen that women have been at the core and the forefront at the fight for justice, and fight against injustice, not just for them, not just for young children, but for everyone. We've seen it spearheaded time and time again, with very little credit to no credit given to women for their work and their actions. We can't look past these injustices, and we can't continue to allow them to happen, not just the gender injustice, but the climate injustice. When a climate disaster hits us, for example, the one that happened in KZN, when a climate disaster hits us, for example, the drought that we had in Cape Town a few years ago, the one that's happening right now in Eastern Cape, we see that women and young girls are the most vulnerable when it comes to having to protect themselves from the already heated or vulnerable spaces that they're in and placed in due to this climate disaster, but also that somehow through it all, they've got to clean up and care for people in those times of crises because of the social reproduction kind of a role that we've assigned women over time. This being a clear aspect of the patriarchy, of the system that is capitalism, that we've kind of assigned women this role of, cool, you're a carer, which means you're going to care for things, but we're not going to acknowledge you and we're going to continue to abuse and harm you. And I think that's where the slap in the face really comes in, where we have to understand that it's more than that. And that we've got to look at women as an example of how we can move forward and how we can push forward. But it also comes into understanding that climate justice is gender justice and vice versa. Where we begin to see a way forward is by looking at the fact that one is not without the other, but in fact, they intersect. We begin to see a future where women are climate resilient and free from harms and from further impact, not only of the climate injustices, but the social and economic harms that face them as well and plague them as well. We also see the need, and I think this was quite beautifully said by Mam Sibongile, is that we need to see young girls and women equipped with the skills, that they need for this future that they don't know is coming. I think we don't all know what's coming, but we do have an inkling of an idea of the realities and the harms that we face today, of what could be coming tomorrow. Educating young girls is so crucial, yet there is a massive issue when it comes to that because of these roles that we've assigned and perpetuated and allowed to continue to plague us when it comes to, this is what a woman does, stay there, do that. When in fact, it shouldn't be that case. It should be everyone doing their best to serve their communities, to serve their family, everyone trying to make sure that we don't have these issues, which is where we're coming to the point of looking at reducing the inequalities that women face, is where we begin to find the origins for climate injustice, is where we begin to see the way forward. If we start with the most affected in mind, in our solution building, we begin to see everyone rise. A rising tide lifts all boats, but some people don't have a boat. And so we've got to begin there. We've even got to begin before then to look at the deeply rooted injustices that prevented us to have the people, or to the people to have those boats, which is where we start looking at the issues of men and others disproportionately, or not disproportionately, but historically rather, shall I say, having this sense of hierarchy, which is not to discredit the harms and injustices that they face and young boys face as well. And I just want to kind of highlight that as well, because I often know that there can be quite a bit of discourse. But the problem is that when it comes from men, there is a bigger issue when it comes to them putting forward the harms and the pain when it comes to gender injustice that we face in this country and across the world. A solution that needs to come forward needs to be one that centers women to the core. Quite often, the way that we see women centering, or movements needing to center women in the core. And so this is where it comes from. It centers women, but it involves all. That's how we see it. This new generation that's coming forward, this new generation of activists, of individuals who don't even want to call themselves activists, but change makers. This is an opportunity for us to mold and to grow the minds of the future to ensure that this happens. There's a new generation of young women who can acknowledge their agency and power. I don't believe in the thing where we say we empower women and young girls. We don't empower women and young girls. We capacitate them. We help them see their own power so that they can act on it. No one can give you your power. No one can take your power away. It rests within you, and the notion that we've instilled and made people believe that they don't have it. That's the issue. We have deprived so many from this thing that we need, which is self-worth and self-belief, which is access to skills, which is access to resources. And we need to break that. We need to break that chain before it breaks us. The way forward, to leave you on a negative note, is that we need everyone to be a part of fixing this broader issue, which is something that's left behind by the patriarchy and this system that is deeply rooted in injustice and capitalism. We need to find a new way forward. We need to find a society and an economy, a way forward that benefits all. We need a caring economy, one that values and acknowledges, not just values in I acknowledge you and I value you, but values cash, money, resources, access to skills, values women, values those who are carers, nurturers. We need a caring economy put forward, one that we not only acknowledge, but we actively implement. we need to look at the lens, at the injustices that we face, the solution through a lens of matricentricity, which means to center the mother, to center the woman. So we need that focus. We need our young boys and we need our men to be raised and to find and unlearn and relearn what it means to be a carer, to be a nurturer, so that we can make sure that we grow a generation of people willing to be accountable, not just have safe spaces, but willing to be accountable for their actions, for their gender, and for the clear injustices that they continue to allow to perpetuate. This is how we begin to see change, not only here in South Africa, but across the continent, across the world. We need to make sure that when we instill these values of caring, of nurturing, of need to be there for others, that it's not only in young women and girls that we put this in. We need to make sure it's everyone. Gender justice is climate justice. And the only way that we begin to see that take play is when we make sure that we see things at a lens of what we'd like to see it. We can't allow things to continue the way that they are. And frankly speaking, it can't only be August each year that we bring it up. I think it's quite a slap in the face to those who have fallen already and those who will continue to fall if we don't continue to act. Thank you, Courtney.